Let's talk a little bit about books. I'd love it if you could conjure some books that at various points in your life were really important to you. As a teenager growing up in California, I'm not sure exactly how that experience went, but were there high school books that were really important to you, and then what later on?
Well, the first books that were really, really important to me were the Little House books. You know, I read the whole series multiple times, and then when my children were old enough, I read the whole series to them multiple times. Those books are still really important. Laura Ingalls Wilder had a very economical style that I really appreciated. In high school, it was your standard stuff. You know, it was Trout Fishing in America, it was Catcher in the Rye, Lady Chatterley's Lover, which I had to hide under my pillow so my mother wouldn't see it, and the nuns wouldn't see it. And, you know, more D.H. Lawrence, all of the stuff you read then. As I got older, I started to read Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and Love in the Time of Cholera is still one of my top 5 books of all time. And I like history books. You know, I love the Hilary Mantel 2 books, Wolf Hall and Bring Up the Bodies. Loved those books. And I read a lot of history books, actually, a lot of Tudor history because I like Shakespeare so much. Other really important books in my life, Love in the Time of Cholera, now I'm blanking. What changed my... Biographies. I liked biographies of women, Maria Callas, Liv Ullmann, Katharine Graham from, you know, Washington Post. Those books, I think they gave me hope, you know, like if you're a woman and you're in an industry that's kind of a boys' club, and how do you do it without using your sexuality, but how do you do it in the right way, you know? I think those books helped me a lot.
Is your life configured that you have a lot of time to read with travel and things, or is it
I read on planes and when I go to bed. You know, I try to read a lot because I love it, not because I need to, because I love it.
Were there any songs inspired by what you were reading?
Well, when we were... Truman Capote. I forgot about him. You know, Other Voices, Other Rooms. That's one of my favorite books of all time. Well, we were reading some Southern things about Southern roots music and the Lomax stuff, and you know, when we were going on these trips. So that kind of indirectly inspired things.
I guess I've been giving into my prejudice for lyrics, but one of the things about this latest album, The River and the Thread, is that John Leventhal, your husband, wrote most of the music, and then you wrote the lyrics, and there is something about that combination of that could be more evocative than anything when those things fall together properly. Was it more difficult doing it this way, or was it freeing, or how did you get to combine the two?
I forgot Jane Austen.
I knew Jane Austen should have been right after Laura Ingalls Wilder.
You know, I've read all of Jane Austen multiple times. In fact, when I bought a Kindle, I reread Pride and Prejudice on the Kindle just to see if it would feel the same as reading it in a real book.
And if people follow you on Twitter, you know that you went through a Jane Austen phase there on Twitter as well.
Well, yes, I did Jane Austen at the Super Bowl, Jane Austen at, I forget where else she went. You know, speaking the voice, Jane Austen. Anyway, writing lyrics and him writing melody. Yeah, someone said after they heard this record to me, they said, this is the sound of a marriage. And that really moved me because that's what marriage is, ideally, is bringing your best selves to the center, right? Creating something that's larger than the two of you, bringing out the best in each other rather than criticizing or tearing it down. And that's what we tried to do in this record. He's got a wider vocabulary musically on instruments, chord progressions, voicings. He hears it all in a very complex way, more than me. And I have a wider palette in lyrics. So it made sense to do it that way. And he would come to me and he'd say, here's a piece of a melody. Can you do something with this? Or I would have a chorus written lyrically and say, can you do this? And then we would weave it together. One song on The River and the Thread, Night School, I completed the lyrics to that and gave it to him. And then he wrote that very beautiful Stephen Fosterish melody.
You married two men who you worked with as producers. And I think that's, and Emmylou did the same with Brian Ahern.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering about something about the relationship of a producer. You really have to give yourself, you have to trust somebody immensely in those positions.
Or fight with them a lot.
Yeah.
And both have happened. We used to fight a lot more in the studio, take everything personally. What do you mean I sang that note flat? You don't love me. Right. And, but we grew out of that. We learned how not to do that. And if we still butt heads in the studio, but we don't really try not to take it personally. I like collaborating with him in that way. Like I said, our strengths are really different. He can sit at a recording console for 12 hours. I cannot do that. I'm physically unable to do that. So that's another way we're different. And also, the lyric ideas I have, that's not how he's wired. So like I said, we bring the best of ourselves to each other. And
when you get a hold of The River and the Thread, if you haven't already, the Southern references in the musical aspect and the production is just really kind of thrilling too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that music, the music of the Delta and Appalachian, even country pop like Bobby Gentry and Tony Joe White, and everything from blues up to the Stephen Fosterish thing. We both love so much, but he is so adept at tapping into that without mimicking it. He nods to it, but he doesn't bow to it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, Rosanne, thank you so much
Thank you.
for your work.
You are the best, David.
Well.
And so is World Cafe.